Go ahead.
Okay, welcome everybody tonight. Thanks for coming out. First of all, I want to thank everybody who had anything to do with the fall show. It took a lot of people to pull that off, and it was quite a success. And we sold 15 paintings, right?
That's
Nancy,
right.
it was very good. But
Mm.
it took a lot of volunteers to sit at the desk and to manage the sales and to talk with the people and show them around, and not to mention all the people who helped uh, approve all the painting, the hangings and the mats and all that stuff, and also getting the paintings on the way out. I mean, it's a big job, and Nancy, you're in charge of it, and you do a beautiful job. You're so organized.
Thank you.
Thank you. That was great. So everybody who had anything to do with that committee, it's very appreciated by everybody. And let's see, the other thing we can announce tonight is the winners of the People's Choice of the Fall Show. So we've got third place, Stefka Yensheva. Congratulations. And your Sunset at Pinery had, do we have to say how many votes everybody had, or does it matter? Or just
You
say,
can.
okay, so 17 votes. And then second place, we had Shoshana Locke, Floral Symphony, 28 votes. And first place, Ronnie Stadput, Calm After the Storm, 45 votes. So congratulations, everybody. That was well done. And Bev Morgan counted over 500 ballots.
Yeah.
So many paintings got variety. Like every painting got some votes, but it seems like out of 500, 500. So we have my husband just interrupted me to put my earphones on. Okay, I guess I can. If I put them in the right ear. Okay, so let's see. Anyway, well done. We've got a color copy of each. Maybe they'll be in the newsletter. Patrick, if you're here, wonderful. And the second thing I'd like to talk about is the holiday party coming up in December. That'll be our holiday social. So, and we're going to have it in the Burgundy Room. So a lot of people have been inquiring about meeting in person, especially when we all got together at the show and people sitting with each other and talking amongst themselves. So people are missing that social aspect. So we will have an in-person meeting. We'll have our annual miniature contest, and we'll have some painting activities, and we'll have refreshments and music. So, come on out and meet your fellow members. We've been doing it for how many years? Holiday party, 40 years now. So we didn't want to break the tradition. That seems to be, a favorite. So even if 50 people come out, that's whoever. It's a busy time of year, but whoever comes out, we all have a good time. So we'll see you there, hopefully. And then the last announcement is Sunnybrook Hospital show. So there's an exhibit we're invited to take part in January 11th to March 15th next year. And it's a non-juried group show. It's open to all current members of the Toronto Watercolour Society. There's no entry fee. But Sunnybrook will take 20% commission in sales. And Nancy will send out the details. So as how to apply and when to drop off and when to pick up and all that stuff. So that'll be coming out soon. And then I think that's about it for any messages we have. Any comments? Anybody else have anything to announce or say? We're good? Okay, then let's announce our artist, Ron Stocke. Now, Ron, I'm curious, did you have that boom cyclone?
We did. I was just talking to Nancy about it, and I want to touch on something that you guys were talking about earlier. With a name like mine, it's been mispronounced throughout my life, and it's pronounced Stoke, but it's spelled Stocke, and so a lot of people get that. And I'm just poking you because you guys had a conversation about it earlier, and I got to tell you, I worked for a job where I got a deal where I had risen to a certain point. And the great thing is that your name went up on a plaque, and not only did they misspell it, but when they gave it to me, they mispronounced it.
Oh, man.
So I'm
yeah.
used to it.
Good. Well, thanks for correcting us. We want to say people's names correctly. So just correct us.
My
So,
wife has
oh,
several names for me, so
oh.
I'll answer to anything.
We all can relate to that. And I'm sure they have names for us too. Well, Ron grew up in Chico, California. And are you in California now? I mean,
No, I live in Seattle, Washington.
yeah,
I was
yeah.
born there.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You born there and you moved to the Pacific Northwest. That's right.
Yeah.
Seattle.
Yeah.
And yeah, you've been there since 1979. So you always loved drawing and painting at an early age. And it said your career was shaped as an artist by life events that encourage you to explore ways to cope with life in a positive, productive way. So I guess you don't
Yeah.
want to share. Do you want to share anything about that?
Well, I'd love to. My first wife, who was an incredible artist, she died very early of colon cancer, and we not only shared that as a couple, but after that, one of the best ways for me to kind of dig myself out of that was just to paint. And we went on to set up a scholarship for her and do some really incredible things. And really, ironically, that's how I met my current wife, Angela, who is a Canadian. And we still carry Ursula's memory with us, and yeah, that's how that happened.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
I think your first wife would be very pleased with that, to be remembered in that way.
I hope so.
And what a great way to cope and to work through it and to keep going.
It's our best tool. I mean,
Yep.
and it's free.
It's free.
Yeah.
I like this. I like this quote that you said that watercolor medium is honest, challenging, and always new. It's the oldest pursuit that I know that has enriched my life at every level. While sometimes frustrating, or even for the most experienced watercolor painter, it is invigorating and always a learning experience.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
I think we can all agree on that. Yeah.
Yep. And that's positive too. That's a great way to have an outlook in life. Yeah.
I agree.
And he's an award-winning watercolor artist. He's a regular contributor to and has been a cover artist for Watercolor Artist Magazine, as well as many other publications. And you do teach a lot of workshops across North America and Europe. You conduct demonstrations and lectures, various art materials, and how to create a safe, environmentally friendly studio. That's important these days. And Ron holds signature membership with American Watercolor Society, the National Watercolor Society, the Northwest Watercolor Society, and you're elected member of the Canadian Society of Painters in Watercolor and a member of the American Impressionist Society. And you've been an artist ambassador for M. Graham Watercolors for 15 years. And we're just I don't know about anybody else, but I'm just hearing about and using Graham watercolors, and they're great. Yeah.
Oh, that is great. I've actually been with them much longer. I need to update that thing.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I've been working with them for probably 25 years, and I'll talk to Nancy after the presentation. I'm sure they're aware of you guys, but I will try to get a sample up for all of the attendees tonight, because it's an interesting paint. It's one of the only watercolors that's made with honey, which there's tons of advantages to that. And if you're an oil painter, they make their oil paint with walnut oil, so you can move out all the solvents out of your studio, and just to help you with that. But it doesn't change the process, the application, any of that. In fact, it simplifies it.
So that's definitely environmentally friendly. So, and
It's
then
great.
Are they made in the States? Where are they made?
They're made right here in Portland, or right down the road in Portland.
Wow. Oh, no wonder. Well, thanks. We'd love that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And thanks to Angela for arranging Ron Stocke to come in and do a presentation for us. Yes.
Yeah, my apologies for being late. Oh my God, the 401, the traffic's gonna kill me. But I wanted to say I use the Graham paints, and I've used them for a couple of years now. They're out of Oregon, just outside of Portland, and they're really beautiful paints. They're really, really nice. I like them a lot.
Yeah, good. It's interesting that 3 of the major paint manufacturers come out of one of the grayest areas in our country. So Gamblin, Graham, and Dan Smith.
Oh,
Yeah.
Dan Smith too.
Yeah.
What's the first one you mentioned?
Gamblin. They
Gamblin,
make
oh, that-
primarily oil paint.
Oh.
Mm.
Okay, Ron, it's all yours now. So
All
take
right.
it away.
Well, we survived the windstorm. Unfortunately, a few neighbors didn't, but cross our fingers that we keep our power. Thank you for having me. Thank you for taking some time out of your evening and watching the video. It's going to be a relatively short video. I'll explain that in a second. Angela, Nancy, thank you guys so much for putting this together. I know I've had a lot of questions back and forth, but thank you for all of your hard work on this. Like I said, I married a Canadian. Canada is, depending on the time of the year, it is my favorite country in the world.
I like how you qualified that.
I go up there a lot. I've taught up there a lot. I love it. I love it. But I have yet to be to Toronto, and I promised Nancy I'll go. I'm gonna go. Nancy suggested that we just if there's a question that comes up that pertains to maybe the painting that's happening right there, I'll pause the video and answer it really quick. If it's a little bit longer explanation, I'll wait until the end. So feel free to ask the questions as you go. I know it's dinner time, so if you're eating potato chips, maybe mute yourself. If you're eating poutine, then feel free. And I think, oh, you know what, Margaret, one of the attendees, asked a question about a workshop I'm doing in Sarasota this January. Margaret, it's going to be the 16th and through the 18th. It's a 3-day workshop, and it's going through the Art Center Sarasota. It's on my website. If you're down there and are interested, just click on the button there and you can get some more information. Okay. So Nancy, are we ready to start? Yeah. Okay, I'm going to share this, and if this doesn't go off right, someone please tell me. So here we go, and I hope you enjoy this. By the way, this is a quick watercolor of a Richmond beach up here in BC. Sketch I did before the paint. I do these ones to simplify and to design the painting. See here,
I think we need the volume turned up again, Ron.
focal point. But I want to address this shadow that's coming from my right-hand side. I did that in the painting.
A little bit more if you can.
We're going to add a figure here just for a little bit more interest. I start out with, I'll pause that real quick. Is that volume, that's the loudest I can get it. Is that okay for everybody? And you feel free to turn up your volume on your computers if you are having a hard time. But by the way, and I should have prefaced this by saying I shot the video, but the audio didn't work, so you'll see a lot of hand gestures. I had to dub over the audio while editing it, so I tried to get them as pretty clean as I can. But again, if you have any questions, just let me know. Here we go. This is my warm blue, a cerulean blue. This was really fun that day. We actually caught these guys by surprise. They line up these boats, and they'll go out and fish for a couple weeks, a week, a day, and then fill their pots, and then come back and sell it directly to the public. No fresher fish you can buy. It's really a fun experience. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to blow through the sky here with a couple colors.
I rarely dance around with a ton of detail. So you'll see this is pretty rough. I'm not stopping or really slowing down for a ton of the detail there. I know that's going to be darker, so I'll go through it. I've got two brushes, as you can see, one cool, one warm, and that's just to help me save a little bit of time from cleaning the brush. I also like to mix the colors on the paper. That's always a better result, I find, when doing a big sky or even a big wash area. That third tertiary color that's created is so much more interesting than the color that we create in our palette. I go right in with my grays just to add a little distance and already start connecting. It's my number one objective is to connect shapes. I'll connect them with warm and cool grays, green grays, red grays. The grays are everywhere, and I use them for that reason. Forget a little bit of the water back behind the boat, right underneath the horizon. I can go under this stuff and through this stuff, especially this boat here. You can do anything there. And knowing that this is all going to be darker. This is all going to go darker. I'll slow down around the figure, but I'm gonna paint through him here in a bit. Again, if the shadow is coming from underneath this awning, I always like to splash the shadow on first, so that A, it feels connected, and two, I'm not having to mess around with that later on. You can see it's starting even now to take shape, and like my mentors always told me, I come to the painting with a plan. We all know that enough can happen during a painting. We don't need another surprise. This turquoise is just the bow of the boat, the inside bow of the boat, and I'm hoping that it adds a little bit of interest there. If it gets lost, that's okay. But if I can keep it clean and maybe splash a little light on it later, or shadow on it later, I think I'll be successful. So a little azo orange for the figure's face. They also have these floats. I guess they're almost like a buoy that they. This isn't a bumper, so this wouldn't be a object to keep a boat from hitting your other boat. It's to keep your lines afloat, I guess. I don't want that to start picking up detail and get futzy in there. If the orange and turquoise start to, mix together, I'll just force a little bit more of that orange in there. And that usually does it. Remember, wet wins. Anytime you put a wet wash into a drying wash, it will force its way through the wash. I'm going to start coming forward on this foreground. Grab the boat. I want to paint the boat and the water at the same time. Let those blend, let them connect. Always think connection. A little bit darker toward the foreground. And you can see I'm not too careful. Again, this boat doesn't matter. We're going to darken it. The only thing I care about is this line, the dock support there. That's going to be a little raw sienna. You already see me starting to pull water off of my brush. Now, I'm supporting my hand there as I shake a little bit, but if some of that water, blue, washes into that yellow, allow it. It's part of it's really part of watercolor. You'll never notice that at the end of the painting. And in fact, I encourage things like that, because normally those passages will be the passages that not only do you not remember as a mistake, but usually they're the passages that you like the most. I'm going to clean this brush out, get a little bit warmer, a little bit darker, go right into that wet wash. Still, just as you can see, just having fun, painting freely, not worrying about details at all here. This is where that big shadow is going to come and land, and I'd much rather have a more interesting shadow than any kind of dock detail or boardwalks there. And my spray bottle and spritz in for texture right where the sun is going to splash onto that. And you'll see once I have the shadow in, all of this will go away. So I've dried the painting, and I'm ready for that middle section, the section that is usually the most difficult. And I like to think of it as really the connecting of all of the puzzle pieces. You've got these great washes, watercolors doing its thing on your paper, and I'm just going to now connect them with my grays. So you can see I've mixed a warm and a cool gray. So there's my ultramarine blue, my burnt sienna. And now you just start to connect the puzzle pieces, starting with the large shapes, moving into your middle, and that's a little warm there, so I'm going to cool it down. Working into your mid-size and smaller shapes. But you're not just painting the positives. Remember, you're going to also start painting the negatives of the negative shapes, the light, if you will, of your painting. I'm keeping these shapes really simple. I don't want the viewer to spend too much time back there. I know that these objects are going to be darker, so I'm going to go right through them. All I'm doing here is just saving the light. And then you can see where I decide to destroy an area, or that it's not as important as another to save it. Certainly not as important as my focal point. This is a size small round brush, and I want to, again, I'm just thinking light. I'm just thinking light and shadows. So I'm going to get in here with a little finer tip and start dancing around just the light. I've got that first color down, so I'm not worried about any of the hard whites being there. This is pushed back into the cabin area. I want to echo that orange color around the painting. That actually exists on the photograph, but I want to make sure to do my due diligence and echo that around the painting. This is the scale that they use to weigh the fish. And I'm going to define it by 2 shadows, nothing else. This is all the gear underneath here. The stuff, I have a silly saying that I say, if you can't hit it with a baseball, don't paint it. And what I mean by that is, if you can't hit that detail, then don't paint it. It's just a waste of your time. It slows the painting process down, and it will usually end up with a shape or a result that you're not happy with. These elements of the boat here, they're not as important as we think. We just want to get a basic shape so that someone can look at this and say, oh, that's a fishing boat, you know, the rigging and the canopies there. And, you know, as long as we've drawn the outside edge proper or correct, then we should be okay. Now I'm getting here underneath the awning. Back here's an actual, there's a cabin, there's a little, there's some shops back there. I'm gonna start with a vent. You see, that's a vent, and I've already thrown a shadow across the rooftop, but I don't wanna do too much back there. This will be the shadow of the awning that the boat, or that is attached to the boat. Cleaning up a little bit around that figure. I still want to keep him somewhat abstract, some energy in them. These are windows. It's just that bric-a-brac that we should have in all of our paintings. It's those abstract strokes that the viewer just accepts and then is able to walk through our painting and I guess find their way to where we wanted them to look, or where we wanted to direct them. Still connecting. Look, I've connected those trees from the right all the way into the boat, all the way into the buildings, now into the figure, and now back into the boat. It's something that I feel it's so important, and it's something that I never used to do as a beginning watercolors, and it's really what changed my my painting and my career. These are just some shadows falling over the bow. Again, if that doesn't turn out, you know, the way I planned it, that's not going to be a game changer. There's two of these buoys there, so I want to start defining them. You'll notice I palette my brush every time on a sponge or on a paper towel. That's just to knock off that drop of water that is on there, so it doesn't go right into the wash that I'm painting. Some simple shadows that are falling across. Now I'm connecting some shadows to that buoy. And then I'll do some work on that later to bring out a little highlight and add some excitement to it. Then my warms and cools. Down into the side of the boat, into the railing. I don't, again, I don't specify, you know, the different shapes. It's just, I'm just painting by value now. And I know this is one of the most difficult parts of watercolor. It's squinting down, it's looking at that object and saying, yes, it's a cooler sitting on the deck of this boat, and but it's the same value as maybe the cabin or some of the fishing gear. You're painting a landscape. Are the trees the same value as a fence line or a mountain, hillside? And just commit to it. Because what eventually will happen, and many of you know this, is you'll start to develop an eye for what areas you can kind of blow through with an abstract brushstroke or series of brushstrokes. You may paint 50, 60% of a painting where it's just a series of these brushstrokes. And
I think we lost volume somehow.
By placing it in that wash,
There we go.
that dark's already, or still wet rather. By placing it in that wash, it's just gonna push its way into that dark to a point where it just kind of settles. I like that look in that color, but very subtle. And you use that a lot in your shadows. I'm now just defining sections of the boat, creating form, thinking light and shadow, connection. But I'm still trying to, connect everything. I'm still thinking connect. I know this looks dark, much darker than the photograph, but once it's dry, I think at the end it'll again. I'm not a photographer. I'm not painting a photograph. I'm painting a painting. One thing we do in the first day of my workshops is often establish our values. And I always have students look at a sketchbook under a light where it's flat and where everybody can look at it. And the value is usually, a 1. If your light of sight is a 1 or a 2. And then I have them place the same sketchbook against a window where it's backlit. And that 1 or 2 value, that white piece of paper, can easily turn into a 5, 6, or 7. So if you're painting lighthouses, for example, and they're backlit, make sure you get that value right. It's so important. Right now, I'm thinking about how this shadow is going to skip over this boardwalk later. That's too wet. I'm going to have to really get this thick paint. And notice how I palette my brush every time on the sponge. So I'm going into the paint. It's a warm and cool. I'm creating my dark here. I'm going into the paint, and I'm getting it to the point where it feels like a dark. And I know that sounds funny, but if we know what dark looks like, we know that a dark is a value 9 or 10. But if we engage a second sense, and in this case, I paint with M-Grant paint, and it's made with honey. I think about if I dipped my brush into a jar of honey, how would that feel? So now I have 2 senses acting so that I make sure to get that dark. I think still wet, still able to absorb a brush stroke without blowing up. This is some of the detail that's being cast onto this box. Now I've got to adjust this reflection. The nice thing about this is I've already set up this dark water line, and now I can go right back into it with a pretty wet wash. This is just my turquoise and ultramarine blue, and go right into it without it blowing up. Oftentimes, all the issues we're having is the consistency of paint, and that is, if we have too close of consistencies in washes, sometimes, and allowing one to dry for a minute, and then going back into it with that same wash, that will usually cause a problem. Oftentimes the paper will react differently. The surface sizing will come up and react in a way that that we don't like. Regarding reflections, I've always tried to simplify, make as few brush strokes as possible. I know there's a ton of rigging and gear up above that boat, and it'd be fun to paint, but I guarantee you it would ruin what I'm trying to do here. It's placed in this strange V or triangle you see here, and I think the viewer gets stuck on that. So simplify that stuff. That's enough information to explain what's going on above that boat. Okay. So now I'm getting into some real dark, some nice juicy darks. You see me paletting my brush so I don't have that wet tip. Now I'm drawing. All it is just drawing. I've got a fine point on my brush, and you'll notice as the painting progresses, I choke down on my brush. I paint a little bit more with my wrists and my hands, where when I began, I was painting at the end of the brush, more with my shoulder, loose, to keep it loose. And all I'm doing here, I'm still painting these abstract shapes, but it's just in a more refined, smaller area, because I want to drive the viewer's eye to that focal point. It's the same old adage. Your darkest darks and your lightest lights need to touch, be near, associate with one another, and that's how we spell out a painting. It's not by using every color in the palette. It's not by painting every detail in that photograph. It's by editing. It's by choosing certain artistic decisions that make it interesting, make it unique. We're just carrying on the cabin, and it's this turquoise that I've been using. And another thing to notice, look at my limited palette. I've probably used 4, maybe 5 colors, but I've mixed them. So that's where I create a harmony or interest, variety in a painting. But more importantly, it's value. It's just value. Reinforcing some of this detail. This is a railing on the boat, and I'm not precious about it. Look, I'm suggesting it, moving in and out of these shapes, shadow side. Closing up, I think more about, tension and connection than anything. And throughout the painting, those 2 things are going through my head. And if I can paint an object and connect it, even though it may look incorrect, if we were to snap a photograph of it, I'd prefer it much more. I'm just spritzing some water into that reflection. The sheen has just broken off the back of that boat and the reflection. So I thought it'd be a good opportunity to throw in some texture. You saw me just there. I got a thirsty brush. I pulled all the water out. It wasn't completely dry, and I just dabbed it in that wet blob of paint so that it wouldn't create a watermark. Now the scale you saw that I did there, now it's connected. I had to reinforce the shadow again, but that's okay. All that's needed on that was those 2 shadows. I'm carrying on with that turquoise. Those are my 2, really main colors to draw some interest. This is the awning that sits above the boat. protecting the deck. Just a few little bits and pieces there. Nothing, I don't want to draw your eye out there too much, but I want to balance the painting. This is fairly transparent now. I'll still have to go in and shadow a little bit of it just to indicate that the gear on top of the cabin. Now to get in some calligraphy. These are one of my favorite brushes, these inexpensive bamboo brushes. They hold a great line and they're perfect for stuff like this. Always trying to pull or drop that calligraphy into a wet area. That way, it just seems to marry it a little bit better. This is the awning that they fold out for the folks that are there to buy the fish. I don't want to spend a ton of time on there, but I want it there. That's, you know, I've got the nice dry brush stroke there. That will spell out most of it. I'll throw some lines on it and then maybe a highlight or two a little bit later. But that's that for now. That's all I need. Just by laying in that dark, you can really now start to see where I intend the viewer to concentrate on. That first view, that first look. Now I want to establish some of these forms, these edges of these boxes or whatever it is on the back of that boat, and I do those with that really super thick paint. This is still wet. But it's not blowing up because of that thick paint. So now I'm gonna let this settle for a second. Still, you know, I'm gonna establish this shadow on the top, and then get into some of these little bits and pieces that need to be done. And here's a point where if you now spend a little too much time on some of this detail that's on the periphery, you can, you know, you can swing that viewer's eye over to an area where you may not want them there. Yes, I believe in balance, but be careful of those issues. This buoy just needs to be reinforced a little bit more. But I'm going to wait until it dries a little bit. A dock pole in the back. It's very rare I'll paint an area with simply one color. I'm always thinking change that color, change that temperature. It just makes for a more interesting wash. Throw in some of the ultramarine blue, and then let the burnt sienna push it down. That's that cabin in the back there. I might regret that one. I think I'm going to bring some of those trees over there to define that a little bit. That was kind of a weird shape. I think about our basic shapes: triangle, circle, square, and probably the worst culprit is a rectangle because of windows and doors. And I'm constantly thinking about where I should place them, how they should be painted. Should they be broken, lost, things like that. Getting in some darks for that back cabin, or it was actually a fish and chips restaurant. Still thinking connect. I can bring it back and do those shadows at the very end. And I like to do most of my big shadows at the very end. I'm just cleaning off a little bit of my palette so I have some real clean color. Oftentimes we tend to get our palettes a little bit dirty. I'm certainly guilty of it. Now I'm just getting a color that I can lay in for shadows on the figure and on the buoys. The figure's face and the buoys are really the same color, but I need to separate this one in the back from the forward one. So I'm just going to lay in a nice dark shadow on him. And then I'll lose this just with some water, just with a little bit of soft edge. I hate going over these shadows again, but I'm careful enough to do it so that they don't look like they've been painted over 3 times now. But I want to be careful of those circles. Like I said, those shapes that we have been aware of probably before we could speak. You know, the circles, triangles, squares, and rectangles. If we place them in a painting, the viewer will go directly to those. So place them strategically. Don't think that stop sign needs to be, you know, exactly where it is in the photograph when you may be able to attach it to a tree or lose an area of it in a shadow. Now it's just back to my darks. This combination I've been using is maroon and ultramarine blue, and it's my warm and cool. And it makes a fantastic dark, as you can see. So now I'm going to start putting in this big shadow dark. I'm attaching it and connecting it to that buoy again. Remember the wet winds philosophy. That way, they're just a little bit softer. They don't stick out as much as they did a second ago. And I can now start placing these shadows. I try to save the big shadows toward the end. Shadows on the boat that some of these objects are casting, I can grab those now. It's dry enough to where I can establish a shadow. My paint's not super wet, so I can paint those without it blowing up. Shadow, so I did that, and the shadow it's casting. And now I'm just pulling these shadows into the boat. You know I've got that dark paint there. I know that when I pull them or push this color into it, it's not going to create a big blossom. It's gonna stay controlled. So I have time to think. I'm not rushing through this. Mixing my colors, making the shadow interesting, warms and cools again. Now I'm grabbing just the little spokes, if you will, of the guardrail on the boardwalk. I don't want a straight line there. If I painted a straight line there, it would just kill it. It would add so much, negative tension to that area that it would kill it. All of this paint's wet, so now I'm shadowing the side of the guardrail. Don't forget the little spokes or the connecting pieces. Don't forget the shadow that's casting. These all can be painted at the same time, and they should, because once if we were to paint that guardrail first, let it dry, and then paint our shadows, it's a separate shape. It's not connected. Warms and cools all the way through it. Shadows of some of the rigging of the boat I'm about to paint here. Continue on. I still want this all wet. It needs to be wet to be connected. I should probably get this boat in here now. And it just needs to be a simple shape. What I don't want to do is paint a perfect, hard angle there without a broken bit there at the top. I want the viewer to be led into the painting with this shape, not stopped and have them look at it and wonder what it is. I want this all connected, and I want it interesting, but I want that visual tension to invite the viewer in, not create an issue. Gauge where your shadows would be. Now everything's all connected. Continue on. I've still got, this is all still wet, so I can just continue this on. Now, this goes back to the, why paint with a small brush when you can get it done with a large brush in less than half the time. So, and an interesting abstract shape, not spelling it out for the viewer. This stuff invites the viewer in. If I was to paint a really perfect shadow, explaining the bow of that boat, explaining the lines and all of the other nonsense, I think the viewer would stop there and get confused. we'll make sure to get this dark. Remember your watercolors, they tend to fade. You know, what is it, 10 to 20%. So I want to make sure I get this nice and dark. Even if this, you might look darker than, or it might look too dark, but it'll dry quite a bit lighter. It's at this point it's really wet, and I really like to paint at an angle, much more here. And so I need to pull off some of that water, let it go someplace. But why not connect the shadows of your lines? Now it's connected visually at the top and at the bottom, the top right and the middle bottom left. Let this paint go. Let these two colors just mix together, create that third color. It's so much more interesting. There's no other medium that does this. This is really one of the things I absolutely love about watercolor. No other medium can do this. So I'm preparing some really dry paint for that cove line at the top of the boat, but I can tell this is not dark enough. So I'm gonna go back and lay in a darker wash. It's not advancing as much as I'd like. If you squint down, it's not advancing as much as I'd like from the distant boat. So I'm just gonna basically do exactly the same thing that I just did there. Warms and cools. I'm gonna let them pour into one another. And this can be an issue for beginning painters. I understand it's frightening at first, but once you understand how the paint reacts and how the paper versus the paint reacts, you'll feel a little bit more confident doing things like this. This needs to dry, and so I'm going to dry it a little bit so that I can lay in some texture, just for interest. That's my spray bottle. Now I'm pulling off a bunch of water, almost all of the water, just going straight in to the color. Almost as, I'm almost sticking my paintbrush directly in the tube at this time, except I'm mixing my dark. This racing stripe or cove line at the top of the boat. It can't be, really pronounced, it can't be super defined like I have here. So I paint this really thick paint, make sure I've got enough on there to where I can now go back in and destroy it a little bit with just some clean water. This is just super dry paint. Establish maybe a water line just to define that a little bit. And now I'm pulling all of the water out of my brush, or all the paint out of my brush. Super clean. This needs to be destroyed. So lift the paper. And you see I start a little line or area where I want the paint to start breaking that line. And then I just hover over it with water, a little bit of paint you saw me grab. And it'll destroy that. And what I'm trying to accomplish is releasing that tension, releasing that visual tension so that now the line's there, we see it, but it's not as It doesn't grab the eye as much as it did a second ago. Now to define the boardwalk a little bit, the form to the blocks there, we have to shadow those. This I would keep dry brush. This goes back to those that point I was making about shapes. Try not to make them these perfect shapes. Try to make them broken. Leave an edge or two, broken up. Don't think you need to fill that in. That little spark of dark, if you'll look at that whole right hand bottom side of that painting, it's really defined by just a few darks. And then I lead the viewer into the focal point. All of the shadows connected. If you were to squint down right now, you see the boat on the right. It's connected to the shadow that crosses the boardwalk. It's connected to the shadow that's being cast from the little support or little railing. I'm just going to throw a little bit of dry brush here. Back into my orange, and I'm looking at the photograph. I'm looking at some of those little bits and pieces that are there. That's a float that's out there on some of that rigging. I apologize if there's some commercial fishermen in the audience, but creating some shadow on this one. I usually like to work in 3 values. That usually creates enough form and interest. The reflection might need a little something, and I mean a little by 3-4 brush strokes, just to define that water. Keep them really brief. Maybe should have painted those at the beginning. I still don't want to do too much, but I want to convince the viewer of this area, and it being reflections. So keep it brief. Don't think that you need to add too much here. You don't want the interest here. Trust me. That should be. So now I need to get work on the boardwalk, some of this last minute detail, and my figure. One thing to notice is you see me paletting the water off the brush, going back into these wells of paint, but notice I'm going to saturate this brush. I'm turning the brush in my hand so that it goes all the way around the brush head, throughout all of the head, all the fibers in the hair, paleting it off, making sure that is so controllable. And I think a lot of people are scared of this, in that maybe it's too dark or it's too strong of a value. But I would say it's so much easier to paint when you do this. And I'd say just try it on some color swatches. I think if you were to, create a wash, create a 4-inch grid, create a wash, put in a nice juicy wash, let it dry for a second, have this dark mixture on a brush, and go into it in different stages. So, maybe at 30 seconds, in a minute, whatever, and watch what happens. I think you'll be interested and learn a lot about how that paint can be controlled. I'm just touching up a few shadows. I'm going into some of the shadows with shadows. There's always a shadow within a shadow. Some of these little bits and pieces where I might not have that third value, and I'm just kind of reinforcing those areas, kind of breaking it up, not spending too much time worrying about it, but just defining it a little bit more, so that spelling out a little bit more of the story. Some abstract brush strokes around the figure. He's going to be wearing an apron, so I know I can go through that because I'm going to paint the same thick paint that I'm painting with him, but a dark. I'm just going to paint his apron color. Now, unfortunately, I went back into that shadow. I don't like to do this. I don't like to go over my shadows, because every time you go over that nice clean wash, it kind of dulls it down, but I just couldn't avoid it. I'm more concerned with connection than I am with that, in this case, at least. Continue on, just loosening edges. You see, I'm pulling some of that really dark paint that I painted before into that loose, nice wash that I just set down. It really is so much about controlling the consistency of your paint and knowing, what it's going to do in this situation. That just takes time. It's the 10,000 hours. A little shadow on that dock post. See, I'm starting to break the cardinal sin. I'm looking for brush strokes to put in, and I know that whenever I do that, whenever I feel this, I'm just putting in unnecessary brush strokes. I just need to get past this and get on with the figure. It's funny, your body tells you that you're wasting brush strokes for some reason. We just tend not to listen to it. I think every painting I've done in the last 20 years, I could probably take back a certain percentage of brush strokes and it would be an improvement. Similar to my golf game, which I'm always trying to improve, but never enough time. For those of you who don't paint in this direct form style, I'd encourage you to try to increase your consistency of your paint throughout the painting. I think it makes sense to take advantage of all of the watercolor capabilities early on, the wet into wet, the washes, all of the mixing of color. But again, as a painting progresses, think about pulling more water out of your brush, and by the end, I think what you'll have is you'll have this consistency of paint that allows you to draw more than paint. So let's move into this figure. One thing about painting over darker areas, I recommend that you be aware of your colors. This is a really opaque orange, and it's going to allow me to paint over this dark. So any colors that are really super sedimentary are usually opaque. Not all, but most. If it's a staining color, that tends to be more transparent. Okay. Just be aware of those. The color charts will tell you whether or not that color is staining or sedimentary, opaque, or transparent. And it just helps you know your palette a little bit more. By the way, this is my only palette. I take this on location as well as paint with it in my studio. And it just helps me not need to learn where a color is or change my habits. Maybe that says more about me than anything, but I just prefer, you know, one set of brushes, one palette, and that way, you know, I can paint a full sheet with this palette, or you know, if I'm in my studio, or a quarter sheet if I'm on location. I guess part of the thinking is I'd rather spend less time on my palette and more time on my painting. That's, I guess, kind of the idea behind mixing color on your paper rather than your palette, not only for the interest and excitement that you gain from it, but so that you're spending your time on your painting, looking at your painting, experiencing it not only visually, but you can tell when there's tension that's building up in a certain area, or when, you know, a shape is pulling your eye one way or another. And yes, I still get it wrong, but I think, you know, over time you develop more of a feel, or as much of a feel as you do a visual feel. Bringing some more darks into my dark areas. From this distance, it's kind of hard to see them, but you know, as you get a little bit closer, they just add a little bit of excitement, a little pop to those areas. I don't know what this is. This is in the photograph. This is some sort of frame, I imagine, to maybe pull up the pots or something. I saw it in the photograph just now, so I thought I'd throw it in. Not to say that I'm sticking solely with the photograph. By now, I probably would have just been going off of my sketchbook, like I said. There's some foreground reading just to establish that boat and make it more interesting. It was such a big shape. It's an interesting shape. It allows you to come into the painting. I think breaking up that line helps. Now here I'm gonna just come in with a few highlights. For me, I'm one to believe that look, why not paint with white? Other mediums use it. I don't know why watercolors tend to stay away from it, but I think in general, smaller sections are better. It is such a flat, opaque pigment that it doesn't look good on a large scale unless you're painting opaque or, you know, a certain, you know, style. I tend to be honest with you, I tend to look at more acrylic and oil painters than watercolors, simply because they don't have a ton of rules. They you know, paint with their darks first. They use white. and they just can achieve something that for a long time watercolors couldn't. These are the boards on the boardwalk, trying to get those straight. Just try to get them from point A to point B, break them up a little bit if you can. A few pieces that are just getting hit by light. And you can see I've mixed a little bit of yellow ochre with my white just to warm it up, just to keep it, just to keep a harmony to it. Now I need to get to these buoys or these floats, and I want to add a little pop of a highlight onto them. And so there's a couple ways I do this, and I'll show you all three of them. This is just a soft synthetic brush, clean water, no color in it, and I'm just destroying an edge, just back and forth. You can see me, I'm just trying to lift up that color so that then I can dab it, and you can see it just has pulled off a little bit of that paint. Now this scrubber, you guys, I'm sure you all have them, this is the stiff scrubber. And oftentimes I'll do the soft synthetic just to create kind of a glow, and then I'll go back in it with a stiff scrubber just for that pop of light, a headlight, some public lighting. Think about that second, bit of light in those objects. Scrubbing it a little bit more just to kind of correct the shape a little bit. Correct the contour of the object I'm trying to highlight. And so if you're fine with that, great. But now the third option, and many times I use all three, is this is just a clean brush, just water. Now I go into the white paint, just dab it and just drop it in the middle of that wash. You may have to correct it, but now it adds a little bit more spark to that highlight. Now I'm just kind of walking it back so that it marries into the wash next to it. Still need to reinforce this. I know I've gone back into this thing a couple times, but I just want to make sure that they're separated. And it's awful close to my focal point, so I thought I would do my my due diligence and correct that. I still want a soft line, but I want those two buoys to be separated. These are just little bits and pieces of my main jewelry color, if you will. Just float them around the painting so that there's a harmony in it. You don't find them in just one spot. Some information inside the boat, a bit of light that is reflected onto another area. And the painting is primarily done, but what marinescape would be a marinescape without a few seagulls in the air? Don't spend a ton of time painting these. They're just dots. They're flying by. They're so fast. And that would not be the time to add any unnecessary detail. Listen, I want to thank you guys for giving me some of your time today and watching the demo. And I hope you were able to pick up a trick or two that you can add to your toolbox that might help with future paintings. I think here I accomplished what I set out to do, which was to paint loose and direct the viewer's eye to my focal point. I'll take a look at the painting and make any major corrections that I need to do afterwards. But I think for the most part, I enjoyed the painting. You see the final painting here And probably the biggest thing that I did add was the maple leaf or the Canadian flag. So thank you again. I really enjoyed painting it. I love your guys' country. I married one of your countrymen. So hopefully we'll meet in the future and have a great day.
Okay, I'm going to stop sharing now. Okay, Nancy, are you going to take over?
Okay, so I think actually Angela will, but before she does, I know there has been a question in the chat for a while. Dave wanted to know what the brand and size of the two mop brushes you used was on the early washes. So right at the beginning when you're doing your initial washes.
Yeah. I have several brands, but I'm going to grab them real quick. I have several brands. These happen to be Tintoretto. It's and also this is a Da Vinci. So they're pretty big. This is a size 10. I think that's the largest that the Da Vinci makes. And the Tintoretto, which is a Italian brand, they make them as well. And I will tell you, this is my largest. This is a Tintoretto, and if you will see, I mean it's big. And here's the one thing I want to just state about these things. So originally the ferrule on these, this is why they're called a quill brush. This is an actual bird quill, feather quill. And what's great about this is when you get it wet, it absorbs the water. And then when it dries, it'll actually constrict and get tighter. So your brush is kind of almost breathing and tightening and expanding, as you use it. The newer line, and this is fine, is these companies that use this acrylic for their ferrule. And it's just a cost-saving measure, but it doesn't have that attribute, but it will probably last twice or 3 times as long. So, and they're half the price.
Dave, did you want to follow up on that question at all?
No, I'm just gathering a small list of large mop brushes because I've been dragging my feet on buying one because I'm looking at like $200 to get a decent one. So
yeah,
I have a smaller, medium-sized brush, and to get by, I just pre-wet the paper when I'm doing a sky. But I need to invest and buy a proper large-sized brush for those early washes.
Yeah, and look, the synthetics have gotten much better over the years. So check out some of the synthetics. The best thing about synthetics is they're going to last much longer than these squirrel brushes. And oftentimes, if you can get one without a wooden handle, they'll have a synthetic handle, then you won't have this issue, because eventually this will start to, the head will start to wobble, and eventually it'll come off. So check. There's so many brands out now that are great. I want to. That's the first time I've listened to that video and watched that video from start to finish. I've edited it, but I apologize about, I went over those damn buoys 2 or 3 times, and I just so I apologize about that. I was cringing as I was going back into that, but it's different when you're painting, and then when you're filming your painting, you're using both sides of your brain, and trust me, I'm not used to using both sides of my brain. It's just usually going with the paint and going. By the way, this is the painting that you guys saw in the demo. It was fun. It's again, it's pretty direct painting.
So Ron, you have a workshop in Sarasota in January. I actually saw it a couple of weeks ago. Do you have regular workshops in like North America, like on a regular basis, or are they different all the time?
Well, they're different all the time, but I definitely throughout the lower 48. I do some in Alaska, but that's probably every third year I do one up in Alaska. I do several in Canada. I was in Victoria just this summer, and I've done several in Nelson, which is, I know that's far away from you guys, but
Yeah.
you know, I'm working my way. And Winnipeg, I've done a couple.
So you're working your way
I'm
east?
working my way east, yes.
That's good.
Yeah.
Well, if anytime you want to, have something in Toronto, that would be great. We'd
I'll
love.
definitely contact you guys.
Yeah, no, for sure. So, I wanted to thank you. It's about 8:30 now. Yeah, unless there's other questions from the members, um, it's
Any
been
art,
great. Yeah, sorry,
or
go ahead.
let's see, any art school education background?
Yeah, I went to a technical art school. It's interesting enough. And my mentor, my watercolor mentor, was my high school art
Good.
teacher, and I painted with him for years. But the technical side of it, you can tell I do a lot of architecture and things like that. Hey, one thing, if you guys, I know it's late there, you guys want to go do something else, but sit on it. If you guys rewatch the video or think about something that you saw in the video and have a question, shoot me an email or run it through Nancy or Angela, and I'll be more than happy to respond.
I have probably a silly question, but when we were looking at the screen, we did not see at least I did not see the foreground boat on the right-hand side. Was that in your photo or is that a compositional design
Well,
addition?
it was just outside of the photo, and so when I did the sketch, I put that shadow in, not thinking. But then when I went back to the painting, I thought, well, I need that to respond to something, so I just threw in, a random boat, just a shape. And I went over that so many times about how that's just an introduction into your focal point.
Leads it in. Great. I
Nice.
also know that I notice you have an innate understanding of perspective. So everything just works.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm constantly working on perspective. It's something that in a technical school they drill into you. And my first series of art jobs I was an architectural renderer. But in my workshops, I usually do a day of perspective just to make it simple and easy. And
Right.
those of you who have seen my book, I have a chapter in there of perspective to make it easy.
Okay. Is that book still available, Ron?
Oh gosh, I don't know. It's pretty old now.
We'll check it out.
I better get busy and write another one.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Well,
Oh, very
so
good.
yeah, so I just wanted to wish, it was a little touch and go there with the video. There was a bomb cyclone. I think that's what you
Cyclone,
call
yeah,
them.
yeah.
Cyclone heading its way, and we weren't quite sure if we would actually manage tonight or not, and what might have been left of his fair city. So thank you for staying with us and and going the extra mile. I'm sure it was very stressful, thinking of what was coming up. So I'm glad you're safe. Glad you're feeling safe.
Thank
And
you.
so unless there's anything else, I'll speak to you after by email.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
it was a great session. There's a lot of very good. compliments to this session. So thank you very much, Ron.
Well, I hope I didn't waste anybody's night. So you
Oh.
guys, thanks
chance.
again for inviting me, and hopefully I'll see some of you soon.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, thanks so much.
Okay,
Thank
bye-bye.
you.
Good night.
Bye.
Thank you.
Good night.
Yeah.
Very good.
Good night, everyone. Have a good evening.